Hello and welcome to Original Soundchat, where video game music is a work of art. On each episode, it's our goal to help you learn about two soundtracks from the world of games, as well as the people, stories, and critical tracks behind them. My name is Joe DeVader.
And I'm Peter Spezia. We're brought to you by Anonymous Dinosaur and Rhymes with Asia. It's time to appreciate great OSTs and the games they come from without getting too bogged down in music theory. Joe, what are this week's games?
Up first is the sequel to one of the most beloved games of all time, trapping its hero in a time loop in order to help him save the world from complete destruction. 2000's The Legend of Zelda: Majora's Mask.
Following that is 2011's The Legend of Zelda: Skyward Sword, the precision-swinging Wii Motion Plus adventure that featured the first orchestration in the history of the then 25-year-old franchise. So yeah, Zelda Week!
Yay, out of nowhere, really. Well, not technically out of nowhere. I think you put down to do Skyward Sword, and I was like, yeah, I'm gonna do a Zelda game too, because it was a really easy theme to make up, and I want to talk about mine, so.
I think that sounds about right, which is weird, because it's like we haven't gotten to Ocarina of Time yet, or any of these other classics. We're just kind of picking strange entries in the series, but great soundtracks there, certainly. And these are two composers that we're highlighting that have worked together on a couple projects, so that's always pretty neat. Joe, how are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. Every week is another week closer to the end of schooling, and I'm looking forward to that part.
Yeah, and I feel like that will, once that passes with school, I think that'll help us complete some more episodes, some more bonus tracks here and there. But yeah, best of luck to you as that finishes up. Meanwhile, I'm still working from home and occasionally have some shoots out. It's a strange time in these COVID days. But let's talk about some of the composer headlines from the past week or so. Following up on the different composers that we've talked about throughout the course of this show, what's going on in their world? Like, what the heck is going on between Mick Gordon and Bethesda?
So the way I understand it, the way it was explained to me at least, I have not had a chance to look into this so much. So for Doom, 2016's Doom, which we have talked about on this show, you brought it way back in the day. The soundtrack release of Doom is very, very good, which is cool because it is a dynamic soundtrack in the game, so it needed special attention to mix and make sound good in the form of a soundtrack that you are listening to. And this meant that release took a very long time, longer than I guess Bethesda wanted it to. And so for Doom Eternal, they decided, nah, we'll mix it ourselves, it's fine, we don't need Mick Gordon to do it for us. And you can tell he didn't mix it.
And from what I read on it, granted, it's all a lot of hearsay and picking responses to tweets and direct messages and things like that. But from what I could tell, it maybe even like the final mix in the game may not have been to his ideal liking. So basically, Mick Gordon did not have full, complete creative control for Doom Eternal like he did with Doom 2016. To the point where, when asked, do you plan to be back for more Doom projects? Mick Gordon does not expect to work with Bethesda ever again, from his point of view. And like, oh, that's not good. Fortunately for there's a soundtrack release planned that Mick Gordon would like to release, and so I think he's working on that himself, but kind of some frayed relationships there.
Yeah, sounds like it. Why would you go to the trouble of hiring one of the best composers currently working in the West in video games and then do this? That doesn't make any sense. You paid for him. Let him do his job.
It's crazy. I'm sure this story is just beginning to be told, so keep an eye out there. Yoko Shimomura is composing for her next project, and it's apparently called Marignon Land of Silence. This is a touring orchestra that's telling a narrative in the tradition of other productions like Peter and the Wolf, as well as Carnival of the Animals. So Not a video game, not a feature film, but a touring orchestra.
It's kind of an interesting thing to hear that Yoko Shimomura is working on. Like, this, I'm sure this is something that has been done before. But I've never heard of it, and I've sure as hell never heard of a video game composer, especially one as big a name as Yoko Shimomura, jumping on something like this. It's weird.
Well, I'm sure that her whimsical melodies are, going to suit this sort of project that's catered towards a younger audience. I'm sure it's going to go off very nicely.
And then lastly, Yuppie Psycho, which is the game, the latest game that Michael Kelly worked on, aka Ga Road, who we talked about for his work on Valhalla Cyberpunk Bartender Action. It has been out for 1 year, and it is confirmed for consoles, though no release date on that yet. They did say that it is currently being tested fully on the Switch specifically, so that is confirmed. And that the tweet says consoles, so I assume PS4, Xbox One, probably as well. At least PS4 at the very least.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, looking forward to that. I own Yuppie Psycho and I still haven't played it, and I should probably get around to that. So, let's do it. Let's talk. Let's talk about The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask, which is my game this week. It was originally released for the Nintendo 64 on April 27th, 2000 in Japan. A North American release would follow on October 26th, with a PAL release on November 17th, and then it would be released on the GameCube in November of 2003 in every region. I believe it was on a disc that came with pre-orders of Wind Waker?
That sounds about right, and it had Ocarina of Time and Master Quest of that, so yeah.
Yeah, so that's how it re-released on that. Unlike a majority of games in the Zelda series, Majora's Mask is a direct sequel to the game that came before it. I believe the only example to that up to this point would have been Zelda 2. So, as it's a direct sequel, the gameplay in Majora is largely identical to The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time, meaning it's an open-world 3D third-person action-adventure game where the player is going on a quest and completing puzzle dungeons in an effort to collect something to stop the big bad guy.
I think that's a pretty good way of describing a Zelda game.
Pretty much. That's what they all basically boil down to, except for one of them. But there are two major differences, which I will get to in a second. While this is not the first game in the series to not feature Zelda or even Ganon, which I believe Link's Awakening is the first one to not feature either of them,
Mm-hmm.
It is still notable and worth pointing out that they are not involved in Majora's Mask at all, outside of Zelda appearing for like a brief moment and a flashback to tell you that you have the ocarina. And that's literally the only appearance that Zelda makes in this entire game, and Ganon isn't even mentioned. In Majora's Mask, the player is, as is tradition, put in control of Link, the hero of time from Hyrule, as he goes on a personal journey after saving the land from the evil Ganondorf. While riding through the woods, Link is attacked by a mischievous imp known as the Skull Kid, who steals his ocarina and scares away his horse before transforming him into a small wooden creature known as a Deku Scrub. As Link gives chase, he soon finds himself in a parallel universe called Termina, specifically emerging in the central city of Clocktown. He bumps into a strange being known as the Happy Mask Salesman, who informs him that the Skull Kid has stolen a very powerful artifact from him known as Majora's Mask, and he has used that mask to doom the world to destruction in 3 days' time. Sure enough, when Link steps outside and looks up, the moon has transformed into a monstrous being and is slowly hurtling towards the planet below. Link now has 3 days to awaken the 4 giants of Termina in order to prevent the end of the world. And when we say 3 days, I'm not talking like 3 story days. There is a timer in Majora's Mask. You actually have 3 in-game days, which in real time equals about 54 minutes. This is the first major difference between Majora and Ocarina. You have a set, time limit to do your stuff. And if the end is coming too close, the player has the option of playing the Song of Time on their Ocarina, which will send them back to the beginning of the first day. However, this will cause them to lose any non-key items that they have collected, such as rupees, arrows, bombs, etc. It'll also reset any side quests or mid-dungeon progress that they may have done before playing the song. And the time of day is also very important because every character in Termina has a set schedule based on the time of day, as well as whether or not Link has done certain things or not. Certain side quests require you to be certain places on specific days to speak with specific people. And the player can also use other Ocarina songs to either skip ahead in time or even to slow down time and allow them more time to complete their current objective. Does time not sound like a real word to you yet? The other major difference between the two games is that Majora's Mask makes heavy use of, as you might have guessed from the name, masks. They are a huge theme throughout the entire game. Throughout Termina, the player will collect several masks, each with its own major or minor ability/purpose, and 4 of the masks actually serve an even greater purpose. You have to get them to complete the game, being the Deku, Goron, and Zora masks, which will, when put on, transform you into a Deku Scrub, a Goron, or a Zora. This gives you the abilities of those species, such as being able to launch from flowers or skip across water as a Deku, roll at high speeds and do really heavy punches as a Goron, or swim underwater with a lot more sort of freedom than you would normally as a Zora. And there's also a 4th transformation mask that can be earned by collecting every single mask in the game. But this mask is only usable during the final boss, so it's not really a collectible so much as it's a reward. And using his heroic skills from the past and the power of these mystical masks, Link must free the land of Termina from this 3-day loop and save its people from certain doom. And this is where I will ask you, Peter, what are your experiences with Majora's Mask?
So, the time constraint stresses me out big time. And I know you can do the song of, was it halftime? Whatever one slows it down to make it slower and more manageable.
Reverse Song of Time, I believe?
That might be it, yeah. It's not double time, obviously. That'd make it even more stressful. But even still, I played and beat this game through emulation on a computer, which meant at certain points I was able to use fun things like the press L to levitate cheat, which is always a delight. But I've never actually played the cartridge and played it straight up. I even own the remake on 3DS and still have not gotten around to it. I love so many games in the Zelda franchise, but Majora's Mask is never one that clicked for me because of the constant pressure of time. And, I'm happy for those that adore it and love all the side quests and all the character stories there, but not a Zelda game for me.
That's fair. On my end, however, it is my favorite Zelda game. It's my favorite game in the series with a bullet. Though Wind Waker comes pretty close, I think. I played it on the Wii Virtual Console the first time. And I have since played the 3D version, which I don't like as much. They made changes to Majora's Mask 3D that I'm just not... they changed the boss fights. They ruined the best boss fight in Zelda, in my opinion. They ruined Goat. Goat is ruined in 3D, and that's a crime. I don't know. I really, really, really love Majora's Mask. I love the atmosphere, which shouldn't be a surprise to you or anybody listening. That is me. It was made for me, basically, because you know me. I love a creepy atmosphere, and Majora's Mask has that in spades. But, yeah, I never was super stressed out by the time limit, but I know other people that had similar experiences where the time limit just sort of killed it for them. So I think that is a very fair and valid reason to not really dig this game all that much. But on my end, I love it.
I think I had one time where like I ran out of time like halfway through the second one, the Goron, the snow, it's not Snow Peak, that's Twilight Princess, but
Snowhead.
That's the one. So yeah, it's like that's all, it's part of it. And then I remember also then getting pretty lost in the Pirate Bay. So like there's just different aspects that didn't click and hit well for me.
Majora's Mask is one of those games where I decided, no, I'm getting all the masks, and I'm not just gonna do it with my own. I have a guide. I opened a guide, and I feel zero shame. I don't care.
Yeah.
Let's do this. I don't tend to open guides for Zelda dungeons very often, though I'm probably going to eat my words when we get to Majora and Smasher Pieces, and I'm on stream struggling. I don't think I used a guide for any of the dungeons except for Great Bay Temple because I didn't have the patience for it, but I think if I went back to it, I'd be fine. But who knows? We'll see. So let's talk about the development of Majora's Mask, because I think in terms of a development story, it's a very, very interesting one. So there were 5 years between Link's Awakening and Ocarina of Time. And when they were looking at that, the team kind of was like, we don't like that. That's too long, which is really weird to look at nowadays when, how long ago was Breath of the Wild?
We just passed 3, yeah.
Yeah, but like by the time Breath of the Wild 2 comes out, it will have been 4, I guarantee it. They decided that what they wanted to do was they wanted to make sure that they got the next game out as fast as they could while still putting out a quality product. So what they ended up doing was they just decided to reuse the engine and many of the assets from Ocarina of Time instead of just, starting the entire development process from scratch, which is what Nintendo tends to do for a lot of their stuff. And so Majora's Mask actually began development under the name Zelda Gaiden, which we have mentioned in previous episodes before, but in case you were not aware, Gaiden basically means side story. And shortly after the release of Ocarina of Time, they jumped right into development, and it took them just over a year to develop with an even smaller team than they took to do Ocarina of Time. A common myth, which I thought was true until researching this, that multiple sources seem to be still sort of mixed on whether or not this is true or not. A common myth seems to be that Majora's Mask began development merely as a remix add-on for Ocarina of Time. I couldn't really find any info to back it up. What I did find was that there was an Ocarina add-on in development for the failed N64 DD, simultaneously alongside Majora's Mask, and this add-on was codenamed Ura Zelda. But Miyamoto has confirmed that Gaiden and Ura were 2 separate projects, and the theory is that Ura Zelda actually ended up as Master Quest for Ocarina of Time. And a lot of this confusion seemed to come out of the fact that when Nintendo mentioned that Gaiden was going to be playable at the first place that it was playable, press just sort of said, oh, that must be what they're calling Ura Zelda now. And it wasn't. It was a different project. Director Eiji Aonuma says that the team was under a great amount of pressure, which, boy, I can't imagine why. They were only following up Ocarina of Time, a monstrous hit that sold over 7 million copies, and already at that point was being considered a revolutionary title in the history of the industry.
That's, I think, what they're going to face here with Breath of the Wild and Breath of the Wild 2.
Probably. That's, oh boy. I hope that game is good. But yeah, I think that's a good point. That is probably similar to what they feel now because it was tremendous pressure. How do you follow that up? How do you follow up one of the at that point, one of the best action-adventure games ever made. And so they decided that they were going to not worry too much about that and just worry about making the best game that they could and see where it went, which is the right approach. So the game's iconic 3-day cycle was actually an attempt to keep the gameplay deep while keeping the data of the game more compact. So there's less in Majora's Mask, which is another criticism I've seen by multiple people. Like, there's 4 dungeons in the whole game, and then you're done. But this, in their opinion, gave them the ability to do more with less. And this idea was reportedly come up with by Shigeru Miyamoto and Yoshiaki Koizumi. Majora's Mask is also one of the only 2 games on the Nintendo 64 to require the N64 expansion pack, the other one being Donkey Kong 64. Perfect Dark also sort of requires it, but only if you want to play the single-player campaign. Otherwise, you can play Perfect Dark multiplayer without the expansion pack. And everything else was just, if you have the expansion pack, it's an improved experience. But these 2 games, if you did not have an expansion pack, you could not play them. And this allowed them to do away with some of the technical limitations that plagued Ocarina of Time, such as the draw distance. It could be farther. The lighting and textures could be better and more detailed, more realistic. They could make use of motion blur, which was a new fancy thing that was probably already on the PlayStation, but let's pretend it wasn't. More characters could be on screen at once, which you can definitely see when you walk into Clock Town. And it also allowed them to have actual building interiors instead of just what they described as cardboard panoramas that Ocarina had in its buildings. And it's theorized that the fact that it needs the expansion pack is connected to the possible history, though this has never been confirmed as far as I could find, that Majora's Mask might have started as a DD title itself. Statistically, considering every single N64 game we've talked about outside of Mario 64 has had that exact same trajectory, probably.
Yeah, a disk drive would make more sense for requiring higher RAM.
Yeah. So, Majora's Mask, still under the Gaiden title, made its first public playable appearance at Nintendo Space World 1999, which used to be their own little expo thing, with screenshots of the demo that was present at the show showing details that make it obvious that it's the game that we would get later on. Clock Town's clock tower is in place. You can see a timer at the bottom of the screen. The Goron mask is shown at some point. It didn't specify whether or not it showed Link turn into a Goron, or if somebody just saw a picture where the Goron mask was, equipped. And when it released to immense critical acclaim. It currently holds a 95 on Metacritic, and of the reviews that the Wikipedia article cites, only one of them dipped below a 9. It is one of the highest regarded games in the franchise, and a lot of players, like myself, cite it as among their favorite games in the series. Within a week of being released in Japan, the game had sold 314,000 copies, and this would eventually rise to 3.36 million copies sold worldwide. The game won 2 awards from the Academy of Interactive Arts and Sciences in 2001, being Action Adventure Game of the Year and Game Design of the Year. And then in 2011, GameFAQs held a bracket to decide the game of the previous decade, being 2000 to 2009, which Majora's Mask won by beating out Super Smash Bros. Brawl. That doesn't actually mean much, but it's still kind of cool to point out. Majora's Mask has also spawned countless creepypastas, which if you do not know what a creepypasta is, it's a spooky story written on the internet. That's basically literally all it is. Most famously, the Ben Drowned creepypasta, which actually for real scared me as a younger person.
It's a weird face, I get it.
I'm pretty sure I had nightmares from Ben Drowned, and I don't know why up to this point. It was the videos that did it. The fact that they hacked the game to make videos. That was a good touch. A remake for the 3DS, called Majora's Mask 3D, was released in 2015, though it is sadly considered the inferior version of the game due to some very specific changes to bosses, as well as certain small aspects like some of the physics and stuff like that. A stage based on the Great Bay area appears in Super Smash Bros. Melee and would make a return in Ultimate, and the Skull Kid himself appears as an assist trophy in Smash 3DS and Wii U, and in Ultimate, where the moon also happens to show up as an assist trophy, my favorite assist trophy in the game. Actually, no, Cappen's my favorite assist trophy, but the moon comes very close.
Moon's really good, yeah.
Skull Kid is also a playable character in Hyrule Warriors Definitive Edition, and the moon also makes multiple appearances in that game as well. So, obviously, as is the case with a lot of older Zelda games, it's hard for us to be able to talk about, like, earlier Zelda games on this show, because for the most part, all of their soundtracks were done by Koji Kondo, and we have already talked about Koji Kondo. But for this game, there happens to have been one composer that did a few tracks, and he appears to be a very prominent name in Nintendo's sound department nowadays. His name is Toru Minegishi. He was born in Japan in 1975, and was born into a family that really valued music, as he put it. They really had a big interest in Latin and tango music specifically. Like, those were the two genres that were pointed out. He claims that his defining moment that made him interested in video game music was actually, funnily enough, watching a commercial for the original Legend of Zelda at the age of 10, and being impressed by how high quality its sound and music was. Don't know how he got that from a commercial, but I'll take his word for it.
And it must have been obviously a Japanese commercial, not an American one with the really bad rapping and creatures from Ganon are really bad.
Yeah, I'm going to assume that Japanese commercials were a bit more low key than our weird 90s, 80s commercials, but who knows? I guess at that point it would have been the 80s. The more you know. From there, his parents actually made him a deal. If he improved in swimming school, then they would purchase him a Famicom with The Legend of Zelda. And he did it. He held up his end of the deal, so they bought him the video game and the console, and he was in love. And then the following year, he would listen to Mussorgsky's Pictures at an Exhibition, which, weirdly enough, we have actually talked about on this show, because one of its movements is in the game Catherine, which we've talked about. This composition apparently had like a massive influence on him. It made him want to go into music. Like, it cemented the fact that he wanted to write music, and he wanted to write it for video games. So, while he was a percussionist in the school band in junior high, and he played drums in a band in college, Minegishi actually has no formal music training whatsoever. He did not go to school for it. He didn't take piano lessons as a kid. Nothing. Nevertheless, Minegishi was determined, and he ended up applying to Nintendo themselves, where after passing a composition exam and a written music test, he was given a position on the sound team at Nintendo EAD. He largely, apparently, likes to make up melodies in his head. He does not tend to use instruments to do it, which sounds insane to me. But he says that occasionally he will use a keyboard or a guitar in the process. But one specific thing that he says he composed without using instruments at all, he is responsible for the iconic GameCube startup jingle. So that's cool. I actually didn't expect that when I started researching this. I didn't expect to find the guy responsible for that. He cites the greatest learning experience of his career to be working on sound effects for Super Mario Sunshine, and he considers Koji Kondo to be one of his biggest inspirations. He is also the voice of Petey Piranha in Mario Sunshine and everywhere else that character has appeared.
Isn't it really funny that, like, when we've talked about Kazumi Totaka and how he's the voice of Yoshi, and it's like, I guess it's got to be somebody. Why not someone on Nintendo's sound team?
Yeah, I mean, it's not like they need to bring in a voice actor to play a character that just makes noises. Like, Why not just get somebody who wants to do a weird sound with their mouth? It works. In terms of discography, his first composition job with Nintendo was for Pokemon Stadium. He then went on to work on Animal Crossing, specifically composing 5 of KK Slider's songs, being KK Corral, KK Bossa, KK Soul, Go KK Writer, and KK Metal, though multiple sources that I could find said he wrote over 50 KK Slider songs, but these are the only 5 that I can find actually said that he wrote them. He's done a lot of work on the Legend of Zelda franchise, starting with Majora's Mask, obviously. He also worked on Wind Waker, Twilight Princess, Phantom Hourglass, and Spirit Tracks. He did music work for Yoshi Touch and Go, Wii Fit, Wii Music, Steel Diver, Super Mario 3D World, Splatoon and Splatoon 2, Mario Kart 8, and most recently was one of the composers behind Super Mario Maker 2. In terms of Smash remixes, we like to point out when a composer we have talked about has done any Smash remixes at all. In Brawl, he did a remix of the title theme of Big Brain Academy, which is a guilty pleasure of mine. That song is weirdly catchy. And in 3DS Wii U, he did Smiles and Tears from Earthbound. A little bit of historical development research for Majora's Mask itself. As I said, all of the music was composed by Koji Kondo, except for Battle, Middle Boss Battle, and Boss Battle, which were all, of course, Toru Minegishi. So this information all comes from Kondo, obviously, because he did the music. Kondo describes it as having, quote, an exotic Chinese opera sound. I don't know what that means, nor do I know if I agree, but I'm not going to argue with Koji Kondo about how he thinks his music sounds.
I wonder if he means the Majora theme.
Maybe.
Which has these really unsettling tones. Yeah, maybe. I'm not sure.
Potentially. I don't know. It's weird. It's a weird description. I don't know if I agree with it. There was an official release of the Majora's Mask soundtrack. It came out in June of 2000 and features 112 tracks on 2 CDs. So what do those tracks sound like? I Hear You Ask, In the Distance. Well, let's get right into it. Let's get into our critical 5, starting with our number 1, Clock Town. Now, the music in the main area of Clocktown actually comes in 3 flavors. What you just heard was Day 1, which is a nice, happy tune, a carefree frolic through the town. But then you get to Day 2. We're still pretty carefree. Everything is fine. I mean, the music got a little bit faster, but it's probably fine. Everything is okay. And then you get to Day 3. Well, throw it all out the window. Carefree is gone. We're all gonna die. It replaces all that carefree energy with just this hectic and sinister energy. And look up. We're all gonna die. Everybody get out. Get out of Clocktown. The moon is coming. This is my favorite town theme in all of Zelda. Though the town theme from your game, when we talk about it, is up there. But this one is my absolute favorite. it does such a great job of giving Clocktown just this personality, and also seamlessly fitting in with the fact that everybody in Clocktown, which is weirdly relevant in today's world, is like willfully making themselves ignorant of the fact that, hey, the moon's not supposed to look like that, guys. But we have a festival to set up, so we can't worry about that right now. It works so well.
Man, doesn't that hit so close to home right now? You're right.
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah, this song and the song I'll present, I feel like, they're on the same sort of tier of level, just as far as really great town themes that set the mood. But you're right, Clocktown is more iconic. Clocktown does deserve the higher placement here. The day one is iconic for sure. I think a lot of people forget about day two and how it like drops out instruments and picks up the pace. But yeah, 3 is terrifying with its bass tones that provide just this dissonance of an unsettling nature.
Yeah, there's a huge dissonance between the two parts of that song, and it just it's so good. And then track number 2 is Song of Healing. Hearing that title, you'd expect it to be a very nice, calm, happy song. This is not so. This is one of the most important themes in the game. It is a song with magical properties that most of the time in Majora's Mask is used to transform unfortunate beings into masks or heal them of bizarre problems, such as turning into a Gibdo, hypothetically. And it just has this weird sort of creepiness to it, but it's also kind of a sad song.
Simplistic, sad, very definitive for this game. Makes a huge impact, and it may not be the most complex melody, but it has the exact tone that this game deserves.
It really fits the Happy Mask Salesman, I feel like, because he's creepy. He's so weird and creepy, and I don't like him. And the manga confirms that he is in fact a demon, and that fits, that tracks. And I think this song in general, because this is kind of his main theme, mostly, because he's the one that teaches it to you. It just fits him perfectly as well.
Well, and you just got to think of how when they're reusing assets and things like that, the Happy Mask Salesman was such a throwaway character and model in Ocarina of Time. Honestly, if you followed through some of the mask trading, maybe there's a little more influence there. But he's a big deal in this game, and it's literally the same model, but way creepier. And then you get things like Kome and Kotake, and they appear in their roles in this game. It's like, what are you doing? Okay, all right, we're gonna roll with this.
I guess you're here. Sure. They're just hanging out in the swamp. Well, I mean, they're allowed to do that. They're retired. Track number 3 is Deku Palace. The Deku Palace is one of the first major locations you visit that is outside of Clocktown. It is home to the Deku Scrubs, as the name might imply. And this song specifically plays during a stealth sequence that's very similar to Ocarina's trek towards Hyrule Castle. But longer, I think. And this song is ridiculously catchy. Mm-hmm. And it kind of has this air of anger to it that just seems to permeate through the entire Deku section of the game. And in my opinion, while the Goron area and the Zora area, Snowhead and Great Bay, have pretty good music, none of them hold a candle to the Deku Palace.
It's the perfect introduction to all this, and it'll be a song that really gets in your head for sure. I think the anger would definitely be the part with the da 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 da. Like it's just these kind of waning, stressed instruments there.
Have you heard the Times End 2 version of this song?
I have not.
When they get to that part in the song, all of the instruments like drop out, and then you just hear this, and then the music picks up like really heavily. It's one of the best remixes I've ever heard. I was stuck between that and what I picked for my remix as which one I was going to do. It's such a good song. Both of those albums are 100% worth your time. After that, for critical track 4, we have Stone Tower Temple. So Stone Tower Temple is the final dungeon of the game. I believe it is largely at certain points considered one of the harder dungeons in Zelda, just in general.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's the most memorable dungeon in the game, like by far with a bullet. And the music is so good. Like it has this air of hopelessness to it. And it also has this mysteriousness to go along with it. And it's just sort of this summing up of how Termina just feels in general. In fact, I think that the Stone Tower Temple in general is the most mysterious location in all of Termina, and this song accurately reflects that completely. This is my favorite dungeon music in the franchise, I think.
Wow, that is high praise indeed. Between the y-axis shifting and scale dimensions changing, I feel like you're right. It is a weird dungeon.
It's a bizarre dungeon, even in like context of Zelda.
Mm-hmm. So, see, I would still put, as far as like my personal favorite, I'd still put Deku Palace. But I think that's just for the catchiness. But this is an important one in the game for sure. And it's really depressing in a lot of ways too.
Yeah. Speaking of depressing in a lot of ways too, critical track number 5 is Last Day. Though this song is more often known as Final Hours, which is how I knew it until I found this title. I've always known it as Final Hours. This is the somber and melancholy song that plays in the final few hours before the moon is going to make impact with Termina. Everybody is about to die. There's nothing anybody can do about it. And you just gotta deal with it or warp back. Those are your two options. And it doesn't matter where you are when you hit this time period, this song replaces every other song in the game. And most of the time when you're hearing this song, it means that you failed this run and it's time for you to run it back. Though this song also makes me think of the Lover's Mask side quest, like a lot, which by the way, is easily the best side quest in the game, 100%. But that's always where my mind goes when I hear this song.
Yeah, I think this is a really important one for the list, just to kind of give it like emotional, but also some narrative closure. It's a really good one, and I feel like it's just a good one to have in the background just for, I wouldn't say easy listening, but just like mood listening and just like set an environmental tone.
It's not an evil sounding song.
Mm-mm.
It's very low key because it's very accepting of what is about to happen.
But also despondent.
Yeah, it reflects the attitude of all of the people of Termina who are basically coming to terms with the fact that, oh yeah, the moon is coming down and we can't stop it. And it sucks, but we're about to die and there's nothing we can do about it. It's just such a good tone and so perfect for what it's trying to bring across. It's fantastic. So, for tracks on the cutting room floor, Peter, you got 2. Hit me with them.
I do have 2. One of my favorites, and I don't know what anyone else thinks about this song, but one of my favorites from this soundtrack for a long time has been Mayor's Meeting. Considering the limitations of a Nintendo 64 game at the time, I think this song is way too good considering its odd place in the game and just a largely forgettable scene where the townsfolk are arguing in the mayor's office about what to do in like the first day of how do we handle this moon coming down. And the energy, the tones, the layering, and just the simplicity of it, it's always stuck in my head as like, this is just so good despite where it plays.
Funnily enough, a couple of YouTube comments were claiming that this is one of Koji Kondo's favorite songs in the game. I couldn't find like an actual source for that, but I mean, we can just say it is so that you feel really good about your choice.
You know, I will do just that. And for how many songs and cues they carried over from Ocarina of Time, at least certain ones here in Majora's Mask, like you gotta feel like there's an extra special sauce in there somewhere.
Yeah, and make no mistake, a lot of the soundtrack was straight up reused from Ocarina of Time.
Sure was. But another one that I think has that kind of special sauce is Giants' theme. Obviously, this is the theme when Link is conversing, so to speak, with the giants. And between, like, the harp and the choir here, just a powerful, simple, almost like a chord progression here. But it's really effective in, like, dealing with this higher power, so to speak.
Mm-hmm. This is one of the standout songs in the game, I think. And I think this one gets overlooked because usually you're like coming down from an adrenaline rush when you hear this song because you just beat a boss. On my end, my first song on the cutting room floor is Boss Battle. There we go. We got one of the songs composed by Toru Minegishi in here. It is not quite my number one, but I think it is among my favorite generic boss themes in the Zelda series, because this was back in the days before every boss got their own song. This is back when everybody had the same song, which is not really a thing anymore in Zelda. I think like Wind Waker might have been the first one to change that.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
From then on, every boss has its own unique theme. But there wasn't room for that on the N64, though there might have been room for that in this game. I don't know.
I think in like the B line, like the B theme in this piece, you can definitely hear like some Twilight Princess, or at least Twilight Princess inspired sort of themes here. And so it makes perfect sense that Toru Minegishi is behind this one, because he would go on to work on a lot of Twilight Princess. I don't know. It just, that's the sense I get with this. Like, the beginning is classic, and even if you think of just what playing during it,
in Time's End 2, the remix of this song is specifically called Adolwa's Mask, and he put in the Adolwa sound effects in the background.
Oh yeah, I mean, I hear it, and that's all I can think of.
It's perfect. It fits so well in the song. Legitimately, if you've never listened to those two albums, go listen to them right now.
But it's that second part of the piece that I do think like, oh, like the da 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 da. It's like, that's like, you can almost copy paste that into Twilight Princess.
Twilight Princess took it a little bit farther, where it's like when you're doing a triumphant thing, the music like swells and gets more triumphant and stuff like that. It's good. After that, my other song on the cutting room floor is another boss theme, though this one kind of different. It is Majora's Wrath Battle. This song is pure chaos, put into a song. Majora's Wrath is weird, like really weird, and like kind of a disturbing creature. And this song leans into that fact really hard and fits it perfectly. I absolutely love this. It's one of the final bosses, if not the final boss. In fact, I believe it is the final boss of the game.
And here you hear that Majora's theme in it. And it's, God, one of the best enemy cues in Zelda, if not video games. Like, you hear that, it's like, oh, Majora, like, boom, done, end of discussion.
Majora's Mask is so cool. Like, that, not the game, the artifact and the thing that comes out of it and everything that comes out of it. I love it. I love it so much. And this song is a pure reflection of that. So what will I never forget about Majora's Mask? It's the atmosphere. Termina is a masterclass in how to take your game and make it seem like it's a kid's game on the outside. Everything looks nice and fine and good. But then when you look close, even slightly, everything's like really messed up and kind of like off. And it makes you uneasy to be in Termina. And I think like that's masterfully done. I adore it. Like I said, this is my favorite game in the series. I adore Majora's Mask.
I wish I liked the game more, but I definitely respect it, and I understand when people appreciate and love it, but yeah, just not for me. But yeah, that moon though. That moon is one of the most like well done passive effects in any video game. Like, you look up at that moon and it is getting closer as you go. It's very clear that this is about to go down the entire time. There is nowhere in the game, unless you are inside, that you cannot look up into the sky and see the moon. It's genius. So, for our transition, we like to highlight a fan remix or cover. I've talked up Time's End quite a few times during this podcast. Seriously, both albums are on Spotify, and they are incredible. They are my two favorite video game remix albums ever. And one of my favorite remixes off of those albums, and in general, is his remix of Clocktown. It is by Theophany. He's the guy who made the albums. I realized I never said his name. That is spelled Theophany. Did you ever look up a description of who Theophany is?
I did not. I know he was an OC remix dude.
I believe, if I read correctly, he was a sound director or like a sound effects. He was on the sound team of Oxenfree for Night School.
Oh, I did not know that. No. Well, there you go. That's really cool, actually. Now I know why I like him so much. Well, his Majora's Mask remixes are fantastic, and best of them all is his remix of Clocktown. So please enjoy that. We will be right back.
From one Zelda game into another Zelda game. But this one's about 11 years apart. Let's talk about The Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword. Skyward Sword was released on November 20th, 2011 in North America for Nintendo Wii. But this was a game that Europe got first worldwide on November 18th. How about that?
That is weird, considering most of the time, when we talk about games, Europe has to wait like upwards of a month, if not longer.
Especially during the Wii times. Japan and Australia got the game on November 23rd and 24th, respectively. The game was re-released on the Wii U eShop in 2016. Honestly, I still think the best way, I mean, if you have Wii U, sure, go and play it that way. But the Wii version still holds up well. So if you're looking to play this Zelda game, that may be the way to go. If you still have your Wii, that is. It was developed by Nintendo EAD, published by Nintendo. Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword is a third-person action-adventure, and you know what? You get the rest. It's a Zelda game. Joe just finished talking about what a Zelda game is. However, there is certainly a unique aspect for Skyward Sword, and that is the Wii Remote. The reliance on motion-controlled technology, specifically the Wii Remote's Motion Plus technology. The technology that was released partway into the Wii's life cycle to help with the one-to-one, more precise movement of the Wii Remote. The idea being that the way the player swings the Wii Remote is just like how Link swings his sword in the game. Especially if you point the sword or the remote in a skyward, upward direction to charge up power for a special attack.
Wow.
Thus, the Skyward Sword. Now, this is the first game in the Legend of Zelda timeline, and the Hylian race of people are living on an island in the sky called Skyloft. And they're bonding with these birds called Loftwings. Now, the hero, Link, is a student at the local Knight Academy. And he is childhood friends with Zelda, who is not royalty, but instead she is the daughter of the Academy's headmaster. After Link defeats his rival Groose in a Loftwing race, Zelda gives Link her sailcloth as a prize, and they take a Loftwing flight together. Because they're all good friends and possibly more. However, disaster strikes when a tornado of darkness suddenly appears, sending Zelda to the mysterious surface below, and this knocks Link unconscious. Now, before Link must rescue his friend, he is led to Skyloft's big shrine, known as the Statue of the Goddess, where a sword resides within that contains the spirit Fi. With a shield in hand as well as the goddess sword, Link and Fi must journey to the surface to find Zelda. What darkness lies below the clouds, and how does this original legend develop? Joe, here's where I'll ask you, what are our experiences with The Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword?
Skyward Sword is the first game that I ever bought at midnight. It was the first game I ever bought, like, out on launch, because I was very excited for it. It was the first Zelda game I ever finished. I had played other Zelda games, started them before that. Like, I'd started Ocarina a couple of times. I think I'd started Link's Awakening before that too. But I'd never finished any of them until Skyward Sword. And then after I finished Skyward Sword, I moved through, like, the whole series, 3D at least. There are still a bunch of 2D ones I haven't played. But yeah, it got me into Zelda, basically, essentially.
Wow. So I guess I'll ask you, where does it kind of rank as far as, like, favorite or most memorable?
Honestly, maybe number 4. Majora is the top, and Wind Waker, as I implied earlier, is number 2. At this point, I might put Breath of the Wild 3, maybe. But I think Skyward Sword is definitely in the top 5.
That's very interesting. I have very fond memories of this game. But, in hindsight, a lot of people like to bag on Skyward Sword. And I don't think that's entirely fair. Granted, I think a lot of other titles, especially 3D Zelda titles, I think surpass Skyward Sword for me. But as a game that I've played through twice fully, I like it. It's just not in that upper echelon for me. And that's not a sense of quality. I think it's the other games being better or ones that I like more. But yeah, I feel like a lot of people unnecessarily rip Skyward Sword, and I don't think that's entirely right.
Yeah, I think I agree. It gets way more hate than it really deserves. I think it's fair that some people don't like it as much or don't like it at all, but I think it gets way more like, it's the worst Zelda game than it really should.
Mm-hmm. So, for a game that is subtitled Skyward Sword, the game's theme was really the use of the sword. And that was the idea going into, like, we've got a Wii remote, we want to swing it around like a sword, right? Well, what sword is most iconic to the Zelda franchise? Oh, that would be the Master Sword. So the team decided to make an origin story for the weapon. And putting this as, like, the first story in the infamous Zelda timeline, yeah, it kind of makes sense. So, after Nintendo Wii's launch in November 2006, the idea of a Zelda game that was only for Wii, because Twilight Princess was at Wii's launch, but also launched on GameCube at the same time. So, a Zelda game that was only for Wii, it was kind of mentioned in around E3 2007, where producer Eiji Aonuma, director for, a lot of Zelda games before, like Majora's Mask, but now a producer. Aonuma wanted a game with one-to-one motion sword combat. And Shigeru Miyamoto confirmed that the game was in development at E3 2008, with later reports saying that this was really just a lot of the planning stages. But then comes the Wii Motion Plus technology. As I mentioned, this new Wii Remote technology that was created, and it launched in June 2009 to give it a higher fidelity of one-to-one motion control. So this Wii Motion Plus technology really allowed for great potential, but it was also a challenge. The idea to include this technology in the game was received very enthusiastically by Aonuma, but it meant restarting a lot of the work that had been done on the game so far. And even then, figuring out how to optimally use the technology was apparently so frustrating that the feature was almost dropped entirely at one point. Like, they almost just gave up trying to make Motion Plus work for Skyward Sword. It took consulting the team that worked on Wii Sports Resort to figure out how to use the technology for sword fighting just right.
I knew there had to be a connection between those two. I knew it.
So, using the Motion Plus for sword combat meant that other buttons on the controller were now freed up. Instead of a button press to swing the sword around, it was motion control. All motion control based on whatever direction and intensity and speed the player was swinging at. So this allowed for the dash ability in Skyward Sword, and this could be mapped to the A button here. Big button on the top of the Wii remote allows Link to perform a variety of running across the land with the stamina wheel, running up cliffs a little bit to get higher ledge grabs. Ultimately, because of Motion Plus being released in June 2009 around E3 time, and then the restarting of the project, the team was hoping to reveal Zelda Wii, so to speak, at E3 2009. But honestly, the best they could end up showing was a concept art piece with Link having his back turned and looking over his shoulder, and then the character that would become Fi. The game ultimately uses warm colors and these brushstroke-like aesthetics that were inspired by Impressionist artwork, which was pioneered in the 19th century by painters such as Claude Monet. In fact, a particular element that was cited by Shigeru Miyamoto was the sky, which he called as it was a tribute to Paul Cézanne's work. So it really started as this more artistic fantasy world-like style, but then ultimately ended up becoming a blend of like the Wind Waker cell shading and the Twilight Princess realism. And it kind of becomes a style on its own, but it's rooted in a modified version of the Twilight Princess engine.
I really love Skyward Sword's art direction. Like, it's watercolor almost. The world looks watercolor at certain points. And I remember that being one of the things that I adored about the game back in the day.
And it really pushed the boundaries of Wii's technology, but I bet it would also look gorgeous with some HD touch-up.
Oh, probably.
Interestingly enough, the continual movements and routines of Skyloft's people were modeled after similar time-driven mechanics from The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask.
Hey!
With similar links between character-specific side quests and the main narrative. Now, when it gets down to the surface, there are 3 big chunks of the overworld that the bulk of the story and its main missions take place on. And you have the forest, you have the volcano, and you have the desert. 3 drastically different areas, of course, for Faron, Eldin, and Lanayru. So with these different areas, they apparently also played off of different specific gameplay themes. For example, the forest overworld revolves around landforms altering gameplay. The volcano overworld focuses on changing the rules of gameplay, while the desert overworld is themed around the duality between present and past. So, when the game was finally revealed as The Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword, this was at E3 2010, and it was demoed during the Nintendo press conference. Ooh, remember then when those were things? During the Nintendo press conference at that show. I went to E3 2010. I was at that press conference. I played the game on the show floor. If you remember that E3 2010 press conference of The Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword, and how it was showing the motion control for the first time, and specifically using the slingshot to hit spiders on a foresty wall. And there's Shigeru Miyamoto trying to aim just right. And whether it was the wireless frequency interference or something else that was going awry, it was one of the worst E3 demos in that recent memory. And oof, that was uncomfortable to be there and watch. Let me just say that.
Yeah, it was bad. That went real bad. I mean, it's not really their fault. I believe them when they say it was because of wireless interference. I doubt the Wii was built to do really precise motion controls in a room full of that many cell phones.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, who's to say? We'll never know at this point.
Yeah, and I feel like that changed a lot of things for Nintendo. Maybe one of the biggest examples of going to Nintendo Directs eventually was to to avoid things like that for what was like their biggest game of that year. Though I did get to play the game on the show floor there, and it was great. I had a great time with it. But then the game was delayed slightly longer for some more refinement work, pushing it into 2011, and after the release of The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time 3D on the new Nintendo 3DS handheld system. However, this slip into 2011 meant that the game could be used as a means to celebrate the series' 25th anniversary. All versions of this game at launch released with an orchestral CD of medleys throughout the history of the franchise, a live orchestra performing on this CD. But then special editions included a gold Wii Remote with the Motion Plus technology built in, making it a nice, sleek form factor, a nice gold sheen to it. And you remember the bulky Motion Plus add-on? Ooh, those were the days.
Yeah. Well, actually, I say that, but I barely remember them. I had them because I had Wii Sports Resort, but I also had and still have one of said gold Wii Remotes.
Oh yeah, it's still the main Wii Remote I use to this day, to be honest. Even to the point when you're like, what about the nunchuck? You play this game with the nunchuck, and you can't just have a differently colored nunchuck. Oh, don't worry. Nintendo eventually released a gold nunchuck available through the Club Nintendo Member Rewards program. Unfortunately, this game is also infamous for having a game-breaking glitch, one of the few on Wii to suffer this problem. It involves the Thunder Dragon part of the late-game Song of the Hero quest. I think basically like the only way to purposely avoid it was to do it as this last part of the three. And when the game kind of introduces you to the three worlds as Pharaon, Eldin, Lanayru in that order, if you kind of do just the same order and keep Lanayru last, you'll be fine. But because for this Song of the Hero quest, it allowed the player to kind of mix things up, the player could stumble into a sequence of events that meant that the other parts could not be attainable, and that's a game-breaking bug. It started off as a send your save file into Nintendo situation, but it would later be fixed apparently with a Wii Shop download that was specifically for that bug.
If I remember correctly, by send your save file into Nintendo, it was actually send your entire Wii to Nintendo.
Mm-hmm.
And they will fix it on there.
But at least it was spotted pretty early, and if you were internet aware, I think you could have generally avoided it. But yeah, a lot of people not so lucky.
I think it was this and Other M that had this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was a big one for sure. And Twilight Princess had one with the Sky Cannon as well. That was a weird one, like very early on in the Wii. But The Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword was a very well-reviewed game with a Metacritic score of 93. It got perfect scores from Game Informer, IGN, Eurogamer, and most impressively of all, Famitsu. This was the third Zelda game to get a perfect score from Famitsu, 40 out of 40, and it was the 16th video game ever at the time to do so. Now, at the time, the biggest critiques were controller issues, where for some players it was hit or miss that the motion control just wouldn't work right. I had no issues with this.
I also had zero issues with the motion controls my whole playthrough.
And I wonder what the environments were for people who did struggle with it. But I think another fair critique is that this game is padded pretty heavily. It's a really long Zelda game. Like, I think both times I've played it, it's taken me upwards of nearly 40 hours. Long Zelda game. And that's because these three main overworlds, these three areas, it seems limited, but they change and players are revisiting them. And it's, oh, we're doing this whole other quest. And geez, okay. Ultimately, I think the game is recognized as like the true vision of what the Wii console could have been with the motion controls. But like I said, there is a very vocal contingent that is against this game, and it's just continued over the years, for better or for worse. I even think of YouTube videos that just say, like, oh, Skyward Sword, what are you doing? And like not even give any valid critiques about it, but okay. All right.
Yeah, the people who hate Skyward Sword really hate Skyward Sword.
And I get it. Like weird things like, okay, I don't need to know that this is an item upon every boot. Like you don't need to show me its place in the menu when you collect a new one. Yes, a simple thing that could have been very easily fixed if we were in the time of patches, but it's not. And it's a fine adventure overall. As far as sales go, though, as of December 2011, the game sold more than 3.41 million units worldwide. 380,000 of these were sold in Japan, while 3.04 million units were sold overseas. It's widely recognized by many outlets that year as the best Wii game of that year, which honestly not too surprising. It was kind of the end of the Wii's life cycle a little bit. But there were even nominations for Game of the Year, notably from the DICE Awards and the BAFTAs. Meanwhile, Electric Gaming Monthly, GameSpot, and Edge named Skyward Sword their Game of the Year. As far as legacy goes, Fi and Girahim were playable characters in Hyrule Warriors, along with other Skyward Sword inclusions in that game, such as Skyloft. Skyloft also, meanwhile, was a stage in Super Smash Bros. For Wii U. Also, when the next console Zelda game rolled around, The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild in 2017, different things in there reference the voice of the Master Sword, even including Fi's sound effects from when she enters and exits the sword in that game. So, little nods and homages to Skyward Sword. Also, Skyward Sword HD has been a rumored Switch game for quite some time, and I don't necessarily see it coming to fruition, but you never know.
Yeah, I'm personally of the opinion, and I don't make Nintendo games. I don't work for Nintendo. I have zero basis. Maybe I'm just an idiot. I don't see how that would work. I feel like Skyward Sword is one of those games that is so heavily designed around the system it was made for that putting it on another system sounds nigh impossible.
Yeah, and I just don't know how the motion control precision has evolved into Switch and the Joy-Cons and all that, but I don't see the same level of precision.
Yeah, me neither.
You don't flip Joy-Cons upside down to calibrate them on a flat surface. Let's just say that much.
Mm-hmm.
So the composer that we'll recognize for the game this week to talk about is Hajime Wakai. Hajime Wakai, born in Kyoto, didn't really give a year or a date, but he apparently learned to play the piano, flute, and saxophone starting at a young age. Wakai attended the Osaka College of Music, and he's been with Nintendo since 1996. Composed for several games, but starting with Skyward Sword and following that game, he's really assumed a lot of sound director roles, especially notably for The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. I guess he likes the wind and windy environments, so it makes you think of, the sky, the overworld in which you fly in. But I was watching him in an interview for Breath of the Wild, and I guess this was among the reasons why he noted that Rivali was his favorite character in Breath of the Wild.
Oh, that's the wrong choice.
Because he says it's controversial and it's a different attitude, but he likes the wind and he likes those kind of environments. So you mentioned how Toru Minegishi provides the voice for PD Piranha. Well, Hajime Wakai provides the voice samples that the Pikmin make. So there you go. Different Nintendo sound employees providing their voice in some capacity. As far as the games that Hajime Wakai has contributed to, he is the main composer on Star Fox 64, which was that was his first entrance at Nintendo. Here you go. Congratulations. But he's also the main composer on Pikmin 1 and 2. He also helped with Pikmin 3. Contributed to Pokemon Stadium and Pokemon Stadium 2. So Pokemon Stadium, where Minegishi and Wakai worked on music together. And also Nintendogs. But Wakai also contributed music to F-Zero X, The Legend of Zelda Wind Waker, New Super Mario Bros., and The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. Since Skyward Sword, he's been sound supervisor for games such as Breath of the Wild, Hey Pikmin, Starlink Battle for Atlas, and the Switch version of The Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening. As you mentioned, we like to mention when someone's done some arrangement work for Super Smash Bros. In Brawl, Hajime Wakai contributed the arrangement to Area 6 and Area 6 version 2. That kind of makes sense since that was one of his babies from Star Fox 64. And in the Wii U version of Super Smash Bros., he contributed the arrangement to Tour for Animal Crossing New Leaf.
So 2 good remixes and 1 not very good remix.
Yeah, version 2, sorry about that one, bud.
Yes, it ain't great.
Hajime Wakai is considered, I guess, the lead or like the director of a composition team for Skyward Sword that included Shiho Fuji, Mahito Yokota, both of whom we've talked about on the show previously, Takeshi Hama, and Koji Kondo. Koji Kondo also we've talked about on this show. Skyward Sword is notable because it is the first Zelda game to use an live orchestra, for the majority of its tracks. Now, Eiji Aonuma initially did not think of using an orchestra for this game, and was still sure that the score would remain synthesized even after Wakai had asked him about it. An orchestra was finally chosen, though, after Shigeru Miyamoto insisted upon it. This was a decision that surprised the entire team. Now, ultimately, not every track was orchestrated, but this was still a radical departure for a Zelda game.
I just picture that. I picture that as Aonuma, like Wakai walking up to him going, "Hey, can we use an orchestra?" And Aonuma going, "Sure, buddy. We can use an orchestra as much as you want. We'll talk about it later. Ask your mom." And they did ask their mom, Miyamoto, who said, "Yeah, let's do an orchestra." I love it. That's how I choose to see that sequence of events.
Yeah, no, I think that sounds pretty accurate based on what I read. In fact, Mahito Yokota was brought in specifically for his orchestration expertise because of his role in the Super Mario Galaxy games. Kondo's role, though, was more supervisory and helping with some arrangements, though he did compose the music that accompanied the prologue video that was describing the mythical origins of Demise and Hylia. While the orchestration allowed for just this greater emotional expression, it was not as easy to refine or adjust the tracks like what could be done with synthesized tracks at the time. So kind of a give and take there. So we've heard what The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask sounded like in 2000. So in 2011 on Nintendo Wii, what does The Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword sound like? Let's get to the 5 critical tracks. We have to start with the main theme of the game, Ballad of the Goddess. This is composed by Hajime Wakai and Takeshi Hama. This is the main theme of the game, as I mentioned, but it is also famous for when the internet discovered that this is just Zelda's lullaby in reverse.
Which was so cool to learn at the time.
It was crazy to learn at the time, and it's because it works so well. It sounds like its own theme that is so triumphant and victorious, and the instrument arrangement sounds amazing for the orchestration because it's like the first fully orchestrated theme in a Zelda game. It's a big deal.
I remember hearing this for the first time I would have heard it for the first time in trailers, but like just hearing it alone for the first time on that disc that came with Skyward Sword, because I'm pretty sure the first thing I did when I got back to my car was put in that CD.
Mm-hmm.
Because why would I not? And the version of Ballad of the Goddess on that CD is still my favorite version of the song in general. It's so good.
Yeah, I mean, that whole CD is amazing, and this song is great. I had to be here, obviously. Yeah, everyone just remembers it. It's like, oh, it's in Zelda's Lullaby Reverse, but it's so much more than that. It's really definitive and iconic for this game. Number 2, though, you referenced it in Majora's Mask. This is Skyloft. This is composed by Shiho Fuji, and it makes sense because, boy, this is an Animal Crossing as heck sounding song. Really gives that feel of like, yeah, life is good here in this town, and nothing can ever go wrong. The main theme that plays when you're in Skyloft. Just really nice instrumentation here with, like, I think it's like an accordion almost, or whatever's doing the main melody there. With you have these flutes and strings. It's just this playful atmosphere. And yeah, I think it's among the better town themes in Zelda history. I don't think it beats Clock Town, but it's up there.
I agree. I would put it among my top 3 town themes just in general. I think Kakariko is also up there. But I think those are the big 3, in my opinion. Yeah. There's also Windfall Island.
Oh, jeez. Yeah, so many good town themes. Absolutely. But I feel like it's the whimsical nature here, but the calm, relaxing setting of it just feels so right for this game. And you're going to be spending a whole lot of time in Skyloft, so it's a really important theme. It's a critical one, for sure. Just like the time you'll be spending in the sky. Number 3 on the Critical 5 is the sky. So because Skyward Sword didn't really have an official soundtrack release, it's kind of mixed on what the titles are. Sometimes I hear this title as being referred to as Skyfield, but this is the big overworld where Link is taking his Loftwing to the skies and flying to, whether it's the different islands that exist in the sky or diving down to the surface below. Such a big, bombastic score with the orchestration, these strings supporting it, but coming in with the big brass, the trumpets cutting through, sounding so good. Really like this theme, and I feel like some people may get annoyed at this one. The ba 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 ba, like, but it's such a good feeling to be controlling your Wii remote, granted in a strange manner, but to have like that freedom of flying, and the sound fits it perfectly.
Yeah, unfortunately, I love this song. This is a great piece. It is unfortunately marred by the fact that flying controls in Skyward Sword are trash. And I will never not believe that. And I know that a critique that a lot of people like to lob at Skyward Sword, and I think it's a fair critique, is that there's nothing in the sky.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's an empty void.
Like, you thought Wind Waker was bad with the water. Oof.
Yeah. But yeah, this song is fantastic, and I think it's actually one of my favorite songs in the game. I think my actual favorite song is on Your Cutting Room Floor, but this comes pretty close.
There are so many good songs in this game. Let's talk about another one Number 4 on the Critical 5, this is Girahim Final Battle. Would you believe this takes place in the final battle against Girahim? Though this is in the phase 1 part of the fight. There are 3 big encounters with Girahim, and so this one is being the final battle. It's got a 2-phase part. The second part, it's like slightly tuned up and faster, and it's just not as good, though it is more intense and chaotic. But I feel like what makes the Girahim fight so interesting, they tried to parallel him almost to like a Dark Link like character who knew your moves before you were even going to make them. And so you had to really be deliberate and outsmart him and be very precise with your sword movements. And so this one in particular gives a feeling of an epic showdown, and it really shows in the instrumentation because over the 3 encounters, the instrumentation grows and excels. Number 2's is super annoying because it adds like this, it's like a little percussion bit where it's like, and it's like, oh my God, give it a rest, please. That's the second encounter, and it's ridiculous. Like clavinet or something. It's something ridiculous. But this one is great because it adds the choir. And it just completes the sound and the vision of what this song started as and then what it ultimately comes to. But yeah, still with this epic feeling, but it's very deliberate and march-like, and you have to be very precise.
I adore Girahim's battle theme. I like Girahim too, but his battle theme is the main reason why I like him. Cause I think it's among my favorite boss fight themes in the series.
Mm-hmm. Just
because it's just the in-your-face start to it. They're like dun 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 dun. It's so good, and like every time it started up, I loved it. That final fight with Girahim, just in general, I remember being very good, very hard, but I remember being very good. So I dig this song a lot.
Yeah, really rewarding to get right. And then demise happens and the music isn't as good. I don't know.
You mean Akuma? When you fight Akuma and
yes.
From Street Fighter.
And then he does the Setsui no Hado.
Basically.
Number 5. Wrapping up the Critical 5 here. This is Fai's Farewell. And I have to keep correcting myself because so many people say Fi, but if you look at the Japanese spelling, it's Fi, and then in Hyrule Warriors, it's Fi, and it's like sci-fi, Wi-Fi, it's Fi, and I have to keep making sure I'm saying Fi.
I think I used to call her Fi as well.
Yep. So Fai's Farewell is composed by Takeshi Hama, and this one in particular is the ending of the game. Fai's theme takes place, from the moment you first meet her throughout the game, but this version here is the most impactful. Still hearing this one, it just breaks my heart. And big time feels moment, guys. I think this one is the best, especially because of the backing instruments for this one. And you even hear in that clip, like you get a little bit of touch of the piano version. That is like the simplest version of this theme. Oh, this one is so good. And I feel like this theme in particular had to be here as a critical piece.
I have a vivid memory of, after seeing this scene, tweeting, Fi annoyed the crap out of me, but I was still very sad to see her go. And I think overall that is a good sign of she's at least written well in one part. She's very annoying. She is the most annoying, like, companion character there has ever been in a Zelda game. I don't stop telling me that my Wii Remote batteries are dying. I know, but even so, you still like have this tinge of sadness when she has to go. And it also has this feeling that then retroactively goes into other Zelda games where it's like, oh, hi, I found her again. I have the Master Sword now. I found her again. It's really nice.
It really is. But for more tracks, let's go to the cutting room floor. Joe, you have 2. What are they?
Now, I can't believe you'd do my boy dirty like this. Not even in the critical 5? What would you cut? I don't know. That's not my decision to make. But where?
It's such a rock solid critical 5. Shut up.
But how can it be rock solid when it doesn't include Groos's theme? This song was composed by Takeshi Hama. This is the meme song. This is the meme song of Zelda. It's the biggest meme song to come out of the entire series. Like, you've probably heard this song, even if you've never listened to the soundtrack of Skyward Sword in your life. If you watch any gaming YouTube anywhere in the world, you have heard Groos's theme at least once. It is the theme of bumbling.
Look, I know the Groos is loose, but maybe I just wanted you to talk about him.
I will happily do this. I love Groos's theme. I don't think that there's any song on your Critical 5 I would cut for Groos's theme, but I adore this song with all my heart, and I adore Groos, my stupid, stupid son.
Look, kudos to the trombone player. I feel like if you're a video game fan and you learned the trombone after Skyward Sword, like, you had to have learned this song. You had to have. Like, this
Probably.
is the song where the trombone shines the most.
Very much so. It's great. I love it. I love you, Groos. I miss you. I wish you were in Smash. I don't actually wish Groos was in Smash. And my other track on the cutting room floor is Guardians Awaken. So at a certain point in Skyward Sword, you have to, like, do these realms of light things, silent realms. They're the realms of light from Twilight Princess, but worse. And they suck. They're a bad part of the game. I hate them. Mm-hmm. But this song is very good, and I feel like when you... Because you put down the, like, suggestions for, like, here are some songs you might want to look into if you don't have any idea what to put on the Critical 5, which, I mean, I didn't need your suggestion for Groos's theme. That was going on there anyways. Mm-hmm. But it had been a while since I'd listened to this song, and I feel like you put it on specifically for me because this is some Silent Hill energy.
This is clench your butthole terrifying. And it may not sound this way if you're just listening to a podcast in your car or at home or whatever, but when you're playing this game, this is the most terrifying song ever in the Legend of Zelda franchise.
Mm-hmm.
Like, oh, holy cow, it's incredible. But it's so frightening, but it's so good. On the complete opposite end of the spectrum, however, my two cutting room floor pieces, the first one is Romance. I feel like Romance is one of my most favorite pieces of music from this generation of video games. It's a theme where anything is possible, or at least it feels that way. It feels straight up out of a movie score. It's really amazing, actually. It's composed by Takeshi Hama. The reason it's not on the critical 5 is because its use in-game is unclear. And the part I played in the clip is part of an extended version of this theme. Most of the Romance versions or songs that play in the game is just the simple plucking, pluck, dun, 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 this little plucking version. Even there's one called Romance in the Air, which is after Link's big Loftwing race victory over Groose, where it's higher pitched and it's faster, and it's like it's not it exactly, but this extended version that has this da 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 da, like it's so special for me to listen to, and I get such a big emotional swell out of it. So I adore this piece wholeheartedly, but because it's kind of mixed on how it's presented in the game, I can't recommend it for a critical 5.
I'm with you. I love this song. I think it's among my favorites in the game. It's gorgeous. I think you've basically said all that needs to be said, but like, yeah, it's a gorgeous piece.
My other one on the cutting room floor is Koloktos/Moldarak. I really don't think it's a hot take to say that Koloktos is the best boss battle in Skyward Sword. But still, if you disagree, fight me.
It's the whip boss battle, right, Koloktos? Yeah. Then you're correct.
It's the whip battle where you're whipping off limbs of this giant automaton and then using the scimitars that he drops to hack away at the core of his body. Like, yeah, it's amazing. And the score that goes with it is this piece, and it is epic as hell. Great use of the orchestration. It also goes with the Moldarak boss battle, which is the big scorpion being, I guess. And I have good memories of fighting him at the E3 demo, specifically on the floor right after the Nintendo press conference. And just like not getting touched. Like, granted, that made me kind of feel good about not only playing Zelda, but feeling about this game, like jumping and dodging to the side and using the sword correctly. So, yeah, I like this piece a whole lot. So, what will I never forget about The Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword? Screw Skykeep. Skykeep is the last dungeon in the game, and it is based off of a slide puzzle.
Oh, right.
And slide puzzles are the bane of my existence, so I will never play that dungeon without using a diligent walkthrough, because once you mess up a slide puzzle, it's real hard to get it back correctly.
You just awoken a bunch of traumatized memories.
And it's a really important dungeon too. The result of what you get out of that dungeon, it's great for the series, but it's in such an awful form. So screw that dungeon. I will forever loathe it there. But this is also at a time where I was attempting in my ill capacities and ways to quote-unquote review the game through less than legitimate means, to the point where before the game came out, I had beaten it and I was trying to write a review for my website at the time. Granted, still bought the game at launch with that Gold Wii remote. But wow. Yeah, so it makes me think of certain things like that, and the idea of burning through a game to the point where you get a little burned out on it. And so when I eventually replayed it from scratch, was actually a couple years ago, but it was a good chunk of time in between. Yeah, it just brings back a lot of good memories, but also a lot of mixed feelings. So I do like the game, but I just like other 3D Zelda games more.
Like I said, it's the first Zelda game I ever finished. I largely credit it with me getting into Zelda in the first place. So, big ups on that. Without it, I never would have played Majora's Mask. I think from there I played Ocarina, then I played Majora, and then I played Wind Waker and Twilight Princess back to back, which is one of the reasons I don't like Twilight Princess as much, because I think I was burning myself out. I've since played Minish Cap, and I've played Link's Awakening, and I played Breath of the Wild when it came out, which I think Breath of the Wild was the second Zelda game I had ever played at launch, obviously, if Skyward Sword was the first one I ever bought at launch. It's one of those things where Majora's Mask is up there among some of my favorite games of all time, and without Skyward Sword, I don't think I would have ever actually gotten to play it.
Very, very interesting. So yeah, so concludes Zelda Week. I'm sure it won't be the last time we talk about a Zelda game, but it just felt right to talk about two back-to-back here. Majora's Mask, Skyward Sword. So for now, that will do it for us this week on Original Soundchat. You can find me on Twitter at PeteSpeakEasy. Joe is over at The Robaga. The video version of the show is on the Rhymes with Asia YouTube channel, also at rhymeswithasia.com. But it's that MP3 podcast version that you want over on Anonymous Dinosaur at anondino.squarespace.com. That's also where you can check out Joe's other show, Smasherpieces, where, coming up, Metal Gear Solid.
Yeah.
Let's also mention that you can not only get the show on podcast services all around the globe, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, whatever have you, but also the MP3 podcast feed is on Spotify. In addition, we also have a Spotify playlist where if we mention a song on the show that is on Spotify, we'll add it to that big growing playlist, though 2 Nintendo games this week, so nothing added there, I bet.
Nope. I wish so much. But like I mentioned, the Times End remixes, both of those albums are on Spotify. Go listen to them. I'm not putting them on the playlist, but go listen to them.
Absolutely. So check those out. And yeah, hopefully we'll get to work on more bonus tracks soon. Joe, who are we talking about next week?
I will be talking about Steve Jablonski.
I will be talking about Steven Gillard. So to play us out, gotta talk about a Ballad of the Goddess cover. So what to do? What's out there? How about one where it's someone playing a harp and singing in the game's Hylian language? This comes from Branna Laurelin on YouTube, and it's a really, really nice cover of Ballad of the Goddess. Thank you so much for listening this week on Original Soundchat. We'll see you next time. Take care.
And